Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Public Works Committee meeting of August 16, 2023. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Reminder that all electronic devices to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. And please note, quorum is present. Joining us around the horseshoe, we have Councillor Cassar. Guest today joining us for a little bit is Councillor Clark. We have Councillor Francis, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Maureen Wilson. And online we have Councillor Crutch as well as Councillor A. Wilson. Moving on with the agenda, Elsie McIntosh, are there any changes to our agenda today, please?
Chair Nan, the following changes were made to the agenda. Number 7, delegations. Tiffany Garvey respecting darts, approved July 12, 2023, is withdrawn. Item number 12, motions. Item number 12.3, the feasibility and cost to construct a multi-use trail on the south side of Mud Street will be moved up to be considered following the approval of previous minutes. And item 13, notices of motion, installation of speed cushions as a traffic calming measure on DiCenzo Drive, Ward 8, has been added to the agenda.
Thank you. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Cassar and seconded by Councillor Taddison, who's joined us in the room. Any discussion on changes to the agenda? Seeing none, it's before committee for approval. That's a thumbs up from Councillor Jackson as well. Isn't that approved? Carried. Next up is declarations of interest. Any to declare at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was on July 12th. Could I get a mover and seconder for the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Cassar, seconded by Councillor Francis. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, it's before committee for approval. Councillor Danko, we're on approval of the minutes. If you want to provide a thumbs up or down. Opposed to the minutes. Let the record show. And that carries. Thank you. On to motion 12.3, which we just approved to bump up before we move on with the agenda. If I could, over to you, Councillor Jackson, to please introduce the motion.
Thank you, Chair Nan. Yes, on behalf of the Ward 9 Councillor Brad Clark, who has joined us at Public Works, moved by myself, seconded by Ward 5 Councillor Matt Francis, feasibility and cost to construct a multi-use trail on the south side of Mud Street, whereas the city is promoting active transportation to lower our greenhouse gas emissions. Whereas his Ward 9 residents walk and cycle to local commercial amenities and municipal parks, and whereas there is no currently sidewalk or multi-use trail along Mud Street, a very busy street I might add, between Paramount and Winterberry Drives, therefore, be it resolved, A, staff be directed to assess the feasibility and cost to construct a multi-use trail on the south side of Mud that would directly connect Paramount with Winterberry Drive, report back to this committee in Q4 this year, and B, any estimated cost for the project to construct a multi-use trail on the south side of Mud connecting Paramount and Winterberry Drive be referred to the 24 capital budget for consideration. Chair Nan, I will allow Councillor Clark to explain the history. Thank you.
Welcome, Councillor Spadafora. Go ahead, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. And first, I want to thank Councillor Tom Jackson and Councillor Matt Francis for sponsoring the motion here today on my behalf. We have been thrilled at the increase in active transportation from our residents in Ward 9. We have many people, you can see it if you come through the area, who are walking and cycling. They're walking to get their groceries, to go to the pharmacy, to go to the movies, to go to a restaurant. We have all of these wonderful amenities. One of the things that has popped up frequently from residents is that there is no direct access or a trail along that Mud Street interchange. Not sure how that happened. but it is what it is. And so I have been asked on behalf of the community to find out the feasibility and what the cost would be to improve that, because quite frankly, we have some residents that are living closer to Councillor Jackson's ward, very close to the Upper Red Hill Valley Parkway, that if they wish to walk just to go to the pharmacy, they have to walk through the community and around rather than directly along Mud Street. So this would help expedite that and encourage more walking and provide safe transportation for young people who are working in many of these retail operations. So I hope the committee will support it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, councillors. First on the speakers list, we have Councillor Maureen Wilson, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. If I could, through you to, I'm assuming Mr. Hollingworth. Just so I understand, could you just provide a definition of a multi-use trail? So what does it, who does it serve? What does it look like? How is it classified? Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation, Planning and Parking, and also recognize other directors here that are part of the integrated active transportation delivery team. With respect to your first question, a multi-use path is typically off the roadway as opposed to a bicycle lane, and it is shared by multiple users, including cyclists, pedestrians, and people who use mobility devices and the like. And if you don't mind repeating your second and third questions, that would be helpful.
Well, I only asked one so far, but she set me up for failure.
But clearly I didn't.
Thank you for that answer. So that's helpful. As you know, I'm a great proponent of choice in mobility. Is this, Councillor Clark, in speaking to it, said perhaps it was an oversight. Some background for me, was the connection, has it been identified in any of our strategic, whether it be a recreational plan, a cycling plan, an active mobility plan? Thank you.
Through the chair, thus far, no. The cycling master plan, which also integrated the trails plan, does not identify a facility on mud. And there's probably various reasons for that. It's sort of a higher order controlled access facility and you know, higher speed. But that said, the cycling master plan is an evolving document, as is the integrated recreational trails master plan. And you know, wherever there's a need, especially when we hear about connectivity for local reasons, I think it's an opportunity to explore things. So the plan is a floor, not a ceiling.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Thank you. So I know it's a request to direct to the capital, but we know that capital typically has operational impacts. So just so I'm clear, because that's why I started asking the definition of a multi-use trail, would the work be undertaken by, like, who would be the sponsor of the work and whose eyes and hands would be on the work? Through the chair.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I mean, the first step in this really is to look at the feasibility of it and determine if it fits, what the grade impacts are, et cetera, what's the best solution. And that would ultimately go through our new council-approved integrated active transportation team, which includes folks from engineering services, folks from Cynthia's group, landscape architecture, Carolyn's group on transportation engineering and design. So then, depending on the flavor of the project and how it proceeds, we decide which group would ultimately take the lead.
Thank you. And sometimes, despite best intention and those expert eyes, will you be doing any outreach with the councillor on some of the specifics of if it gets approved? I'm thinking hypothetically, in its design. Through the chair.
Through the chair, that would be definitely part of our normal process.
Yeah, I just think that moving ahead, too far ahead, but that's really important because as much as we look at things on paper, if we don't have the actual users or what we think will be the users at the table, sometimes we can just miss that little thing that can frustrate the delivery of a project. And I know we have some folks, I think, from the cycling community or committee here today. So thank you. I'm very pleased to support this motion, and very pleased that now we have a greater capacity for staff. As Mr. Hollingworth said, this is not a what was the phrase you used? Not a ceiling, or
It's the floor, not the ceiling?
yeah, it's a floor, not a ceiling. Those of us who champion that pumping up the volume, if you will, of your group and that table, the importance, and this is what we were hoping to see as more residents are choosing, and we want to afford them that chance to choose because it's just better for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, just to the bench, getting a confirmation that the Q4 report back makes sense. I bring this up just because later on the OBL, there's a deferral of a very similar multi-use path that's being funded by a community group. So it's not necessarily coming from city dollars, but there is a city project management. And there's a recommendation from staff to put that back further. Similarly, the Grant Boulevard staircase, which is in the Cycling and Trails Master Plan, there's some existing work on renewing that. And so just wondering, I similar to the past speaker, very much want to get this done and want to move forward. Also want to make sure that we're doing this project management across our city and within our master planning. So just, does that report back deadline make sense for the staff? And maybe a little bit of insight on, like, we're not bumping existing work by saying Q4 is really what I'm seeking confirmation on.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So Q4 is the report back of the feasibility study, and then the question about prioritization and other existing projects on the OBL.
Thanks, Director Jackie Kennedy of Engineering Services. I think, frankly, that a Q4 report back is somewhat of an optimistic time frame for this. We do have staff fully engaged in other work at the moment, and so retooling to focus on this at this moment would certainly affect other work. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I don't have a further question. I guess I'd look to the mover for leadership on maybe how to resolve that concern or what happens there, because I want to see this happen too, but I think it's in all of our best interest to do it with working with our staff team. And so I think I'll leave that there and look forward to kind of this being resolved in further conversation.
Got it, offline then. Okay, that exhausts our speakers list. It's been duly moved and seconded, and lots of support for the work getting done, although albeit might be delayed in terms of a report back. We'll find out for sure soon. Okay, before committee for approval or consideration, sorry. Thank you, and that carries 11-0. Over to delegation requests, item 6. So first up is 6.1, Chris Ritzma, respecting item 11.3 from the Bay Street North truck route for today's meeting. May I please get a mover and seconder to approve the delegation request? Thank you, Councillor Spatafora, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Any discussion? Seeing none, if we could go to the vote. Are we waiting for anyone to vote? Oh, yeah. That's a thumbs up. That carries, thank you. On to delegations then. Members are reminded that questions of the delegates are for clarification purposes only and not for debate. And so first up, we do have Chris Ritzma, who we just approved on the item regarding the truck route, and specifically item 11.3 on Bay Street North. You have 5 minutes to provide your remarks, Delegate Ritzma, and whenever you're ready.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for staff and members of Public Works for having me here today. I want to start by appreciating the big strides Hamilton has been making related to cycling in recent years. I moved here 5 years ago and moved from a primarily driving lifestyle to primarily getting around by bicycle. This was not, I wasn't really cycling for many years before this, so it's not like I was a big cyclist before I moved here. I did so honestly because my area, cycling is the best way to get around. Faster than walking or even taking the bus often, and sometimes even faster than driving. Looking at Google Street View from years back shows me I would have likely chosen to drive most places, regardless of distance, because there was simply nowhere for me to cycle comfortably. That's important because both myself and my partner are not cycling experts. We don't really watch the Tour de France, and we don't wake up to go on rides at 5 a.m. I have no issues with those who do, but I want to make it clear, I just want to get from point A to point B, do so comfortably and preferably without dying. Hamilton has followed in the footsteps of great cycling infrastructure build-outs seen in nearby cities like Toronto and Montreal, as well as many American ones and European ones. But I keep hearing that Hamilton is the ambitious city, and I keep wondering what exactly it's ambitious about. So let's talk about a city in Canada, I think known for its recent urban renaissance, Montreal. It has a proven track record and clear plan about building out pedestrian and cycling infrastructure that has been consistent, has been approved upon with various iterations, and clearly focuses on equity, the current climate crisis, and stated goals of Vision Zero. While Hamilton deals with the very real issue of not having always a clear plan, vague platitudes that cycling infrastructure will get better eventually, only for community members having to fight tooth and nail at the last minute after engineering documents reveal a painted bicycle lane will remain one maybe until the next capital reconstruction in 20 years. Bay Street North is the perfect example to show Hamilton has a clear plan, and while I want to be clear, this isn't an issue specific to this street. There are many others like it, such as Stinson and Delaware, various on the mountain, Ancaster and Dundas. Bay Street North continues to be a truck route under the new truck route master plan, with large grain trucks barreling down it regularly. We've dedicated the space to cyclists on Bay Street, so let's build actual infrastructure. This is a popular bicycle lane in the summer and used quite regularly in the winter, sorry. It's the only cycling connection to West Harbour GO as a regional transit station and a future hub for HSR under the re-envisioned HSR plan. Right now, though there might as well not be a cycle lane at all because it's so regularly blocked that you rarely get to use, the entirety of the lane over its 750-meter length. So I have a few pictures here of, on the left you'll see that there's some nice protection when they're doing some construction on the streets behind, as well as a few cars blocking the bike lane. I've taken these photos over the last 2 years of living around this area. I have a few more. This is further south, but just thought it was interesting. There's a lot. Froze. So anyway, over the last 2 year span, during my 5-minute, 800-meter commute along this trip, I've taken over 120 unique photos of vehicles blocking the lane. I don't take photos in the winter because I'm wearing gloves. And there are many other instances during the warm months where I just can't be bothered. I have lots of examples, as you can see. So, this is a pervasive issue that can be rectified, not by increasing enforcement, though it's something that would be nice as well to proactively see by our bylaw. But there are some quick, easy wins, such as lowering the speed limit, moving the lanes behind parked cars, and showing the cycling community, the neighbors, and the people who use this street on their bicycle that there's a clear plan for improvement in the future. I'm okay with painted bicycle lanes as they dedicate space to bicycles, where before cyclists would just be expected to share the road with cars in their lane. Bay Street North of today is better than it was 10 years ago. But this acceptance of painted bicycle lanes extends only if they are assumed to be a temporary condition until proper infrastructure is installed. It's not clear that this is the plan, and the city's cycling plan must reflect that the plan is to improve its existing and utilized cycling network, and it can show that by making incremental changes along the way.
I'm going to try that one more time. There's the live microphone. Thank you so much for your delegation, Chris. We have a speakers list that's open. First up is Councillor Crutch.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm behind you. Thanks for your delegation, Chris. Is this your first time back since your other delegation on behalf of the cycling committee with, I think it was Jessica Morelli?
I believe so. At least not member of the cycling committee here, just to make that clear. But I think this is my first time in person, yes.
Well, welcome back to what I hope is a much friendlier delegation space than the last time. I wanted to ask you if you could expand on one thing, talking about changing it from behind parked cars, like behind parking. Could you expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so currently the bicycle lane, the configuration of the street is sidewalk, parked cars, bicycle lane, active transportation lane. The street is a bit tight. I'm not an engineer, though I did go out and measure with a tape measure. But it seems like there should be room potentially, and this is listed in the motion as potential options for staff to review, of course. But the expectation here would be to move the bicycle lane behind the parked cars, assuming there's enough room for a buffer space, so that way they're protected by the parked cars rather than kind of on the outside edge of the parked cars.
Thanks. As someone who uses this bike lane regularly and lives also just off Bay Street, I've taken countless photos myself and appreciate the advocacy online and making people aware of this issue. I think it's really important because this is a very dangerous area. Could you speak specifically to the section, I think as we start getting north, we get to Bay and Cannon. I know you've talked about that a lot, but I don't see recommendations here about that specifically in terms of fixing it unless I missed it. Could you speak to that section? The conversion, like moving over that issue. Yeah,
so I mean, it's not specific to this motion, though it does connect to that intersection and it is a point of contention. I know that the cycling committee has spoken a little bit about that intersection, and I know that York and Cannon to James is to be reconstructed soon-ish. My hope is that, while this bicycle lane could use some improvements, the intersections, of course, that connect the bicycle lane here would also be great to see improvements. I'd love to see a bicycle phase. I honestly think that it should see a separate left turn and pedestrian phase as well, which would improve car flows, because honestly, cars get backed up here too, and it causes a lot of contention between people walking and cycling, because I think drivers sometimes feel like they're blocking them and maybe one or two cars can get through on a light cycle. So I'd like to see an improved intersection there that sees a bicycle phase, which could connect up to these potentially also improved bicycle lanes through the chair.
Thanks very much. Fully supportive of these recommendations, and I'll speak to it when we get to 11.3. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers on the delegation regarding the Citizen Committee report? Seeing none, thank you for your delegation.
Thank you.
And at this point, please, may I have a mover and seconder to receive the delegation? Moved by Councillor Cassar, seconded by, thought I saw a hand, Councillor Francis. Thank you. Are we waiting for Councillor Wilson? Councillor Maureen Wilson has a thumbs up to receive the delegation, and that carries. Thank you again. Take care. Next up, we have consent items. First up is 9.1, the Citizen Committee member resignation from the Hamilton Cycling Committee. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive this item? Moved by Councillor Spadafora, seconded by Councillor Taddison. Any discussion on the resignation? Seeing none, then we'll move to an electronic vote, please. That carries on to 9.2, which is the Hamilton Cycling Committee minutes of May 3rd, 2003. May I please have a mover and seconder? Councillor Spadafora, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Taddison. Any discussion on the minutes from the committee? Seeing none, it's before committee for your electronic vote. Oh, my apologies, hang tight. There's a request by Councillor Maureen Wilson on this item.
Thank you. On the minutes, there is reference to the action that this committee provided for staff to review. I think it was a jurisdictional scan and the outcomes in terms of health and safety of the what is typically known as the Idaho stop. And I know that would require provincial permissions, but just seeing if there's any update on the timing of that delivery. Thank you.
Thank you. So over to staff. Any comments on the Idaho stop portion of the minutes?
And if not, that's fine. I can take it offline. I just thought it was noted, so.
Okay, not at this time, so we'll take it offline. Thank you, Councillor. And it's been moved and seconded, and this is receipt of the minutes. And that carries. Thank you. On to 9.3, intersection controls list PW 23001B, impacting wards 1, 5, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 14. May I please have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Spadafora. Any discussion on this item? Councillor Kassar.
Thank you very much, Chair Nan. I just wanted to ask staff to elaborate a little bit on the intersection control list. It's E, Book Road East and South Code in Ward 12. So the recommendation in here is to remove an all-way stop and to just have a stop control for South Code, so allowing traffic to move along Book Road without stopping. I just wanted staff, if they could elaborate for public record on the rationale for that, please. Thank you.
Director Ryle.
Good afternoon, Director Ryle of Transportation. I'm sorry, Councillor, I didn't hear what intersection you were requesting more information on.
It's item E on the list, Book Road East at South Code Road in Ward 12.
Thank you for the question. So through the chair, my understanding in reviewing this with staff was that there was construction that was occurring in the area. So in order to deal with the work that was happening out on site, they decided to put in a temporary all-way stop just to deal with the flow of the traffic during the construction. Since the construction has now been completed, my understanding is that the removal, it has to do with the fact that there is the free flow of the traffic and they don't see the need for the all-way stop when they took a look at it through the warrant process.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm supportive.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers on this item, it's been moved and seconded for committee for electronic vote, please.
I'm sorry.
That carries on to discussion items. First up is 11.1, signed on-street routes, Hamilton Cycling Committee Citizen Committee Report. May I please have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Spadafora and Taddison. Any questions or discussions from the committee members respecting this report? Okay, speakers list is open. So first up on the electronic speakers list is Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm generally supportive of what's in this report, but I think our staff are already doing most, if not all of this already. And I'm just procedurally wondering, what does this mean? Are we receiving these recommendations or are we actually setting direction?
Yep, procedurally, we would need a motion to receive, and then if there's anything committee wants actioned out of the citizen report, then there would be corresponding directive action to staff.
Okay, so I think the appropriate direction then would be to receive and refer to staff, because I think most of these are already ongoing in various different capacities and different responsibilities. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. That would be my preference. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Kassar, followed by Councillor Cretch.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very similar question. Maybe I'll just build on what Councillor Danko was asking. Is, if possible, today, is staff able to speak at a high level to what's being recommended here and to what Councillor Danko was saying? Is this work already being done, and the value of referring it independently of what may be happening today? Thank you.
Perfect. Over to staff.
Through the staff, Brian Hollinger, Transportation Planning and Parking, and I'll ask other colleagues to weigh in as needed. But these are all, I think, laudable recommendations, appropriate coming from the Cycling Citizen Committee, but they are definitely things that are already in a lot of our, enshrined in a lot of our policies. So the Vision Zero policy, Complete Streets, talks about things like lane widths. You may recall, I think it was last year, we brought forth a report on bicycle boulevards, with Ward 1 being kind of a key pilot for those, and some of that's taking place. Transportation under Carolyn is undertaking a lot of the what's called the Complete Streets neighborhood studies, which takes into a lot of this. We have a council-approved all ages and abilities framework that speaks to this. So it's great stuff, but would agree that a lot of this is just already enshrined in council-approved policies.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Councillor Kassar. Are you satisfied? Any follow-up?
Yeah, as we kind of suspected, that makes sense. So thank you for that. I would accept that. Maybe just one clarification on some terminology used here just for public consumption. If you could just define signed on-street routes so there's clarity on what that means.
So signed on street routes is something we had in our previous cycling master plan, and these are lower volume streets that are good for cycling, but they don't have enough width or for designated lanes or separated facilities. They go by multiple names in different jurisdictions. I mentioned bike boulevards. That's a term we're starting to use, which takes just the signed routes and elevates it a little bit to include features like traffic calming. Vancouver calls them neighborhood greenways, but essentially they're all the same thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. That's all.
Thank you. Over to Councillor Cretch.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much. I apologize, my audio just clicked out a little bit. I didn't hear all of what staff said, which is fine. I think I got the gist. But I will be wanting to put this forward as asking staff on all three of these, 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3, to report back, if possible, on these recommendations. The Cycling Committee, as an advisory committee, is working with staff a lot of the time when they're making these recommendations, having conversations, bringing them forward in good faith. Lots of folks who are trying to get some answers and improvements. I think getting an answer back from staff formally to help us inform our decision is important. And if some things can be implemented, great. If some things are already happening, also great to know. But I think it's important to get that feedback. So that'd be my desire for this in terms of where we go next.
Thank you, Councillor. If I could turn the chair over to you, Vice Chair Pauls.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So similarly, I was wondering if it's possible, maybe through acting GM, that when there are citizen committee report recommendations that tie to existing plans that are under the purview of Public Works Committee, when we're receiving updates on those plans, that it clearly indicate inside those reports that this recommendation or this update also addresses citizen committee recommendation XYZ. It does help then to address the transparency, accountability, but also communication back to our citizen representatives, where we've heard the feedback that citizen committee members often don't know when things have been implemented. So I'll leave that in your very fine, capable hands and take back the chair.
Thank you.
And so we're on item 11.1. It's been moved and seconded. Does committee want to address each one separately? Or do we want to pursue the motion that Councillor Crutch had indicated, which is to receive and refer all three, and that staff will report back on those recommendations where they exist within existing plans as indicated by staff? See some nods, so we're good to go that way? Okay. So hold on, technically it's not on the floor yet, so I would need a mover and seconder. If people want to speak to this recommendation, then we can do it that way. So moved by Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Danko. Floor is open for speakers list. Councillor Pauls.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question just before I took the chair. I'm wondering if somebody could explain, how do we decide how to separate a bike lane, either by just a painted line, or a cement, those short cement, or those billiards, I think they're called. How do we make the decision to use those?
Do you want to take that, Carolyn? I can start out, and I think Carolyn probably has something to add, but just generally high level, we tend to rely a lot on guidelines that are at the national level. And Ontario, there's something called Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18, which provides guidance. Actually, in this Citizens Committee report, I believe it has the nomograph, which helps us look at things like speeds and volumes and select the right type of facility. And then a lot of times it comes down to feasibility, whether it's part of a road reconstruction project or a new project, does it fit, and probably many other traffic level details.
Thank you for that. And the reason I'm asking is last week I was biking to my son's house, and he lives in Dundas. And I was coming down Wilson Street, and Wilson Street, now there is a bike lane going up and a bike lane coming down. And as I'm biking, I am clipped in. And one of those cement block was on the bike lane, was twisted. And I could not unclip fast enough, and I almost hurt myself because there's the curb on one side, there's the cement blocks, and one of them was in the bike lane, and I had nowhere to go but try to fall ahead of time. So I'm wondering, when do those blocks get checked?
Okay, so regular maintenance on cement infrastructure on bike lanes. Director Ryle.
Director Ryle, Transportation Services Division. So thank you for the question. Sorry to hear that. It's very, it's a safety matter that we take not too lightly. We do have patrols that are out on the road daily. So depending on the time of the day that would have occurred, the patrol potentially could have already gone through that area. So we do drive the roads daily, and we do check for anything that may be on the road, and we do obviously address that as required. For instances where this may occur, contacting myself or the division through our hotline number is imperative, because we will send out staff immediately to deal with the situation so it doesn't impact anybody else who may be on the trail or the bike lane, to assist with it as quickly as possible. We do take these very serious, obviously, from a safety perspective, and we will address it.
Thank you, Director.
And I've never liked cement block on one side, especially when they're broken in. And the reason is because if I'm protected by the car, but also if I ever fall, I'm going to hit the block and kill myself, or anybody would. Because even the bike lane, sometimes there's debris, and you got to go over the debris. Because that day that I went biking, I told my son, and my son bikes there all the time. He lives in Dundas, and he goes to go to work. He goes up Wilson. And I'm just wondering, those maintenance has to really, if we're going to put those cement there, and I have no idea why one would have been twisted, could somebody explain how a cement like that could be
So
twisted?
perhaps, given the specificity on
Yeah.
the site-specific questions that you have, if we could take them offline, and just a PSA to all citizens and counselors and everybody who's riding our wonderful bike lanes across the city, if you see something, please report it in, especially if it's
Yeah.
a safety concern or hazard for other
Right,
users.
I'm just wondering
So
how
if we
a
could,
cement like that
please,
could be moved, that's all.
yeah.
That's all I was asking. I
Great.
mean, how can it be moved
Yeah.
to that?
So
anyways,
hopefully you get a good follow-up by email or a phone call from staff on that good question. Seeing no other, we do have several other speakers on the motion that's before us. Next up, we have Councillor Danko, followed by Councillor Crutch.
Thank you. So I definitely appreciate the intention to have a report back to close the loop for this committee and for members of the cycling committee. I just want to be clear on the format of what that report is going to be. So I'm thinking that would be staff would take these recommendations, map them to work that's already ongoing, report back in an information report. That's my understanding, just if I can get clarity for staff. And if they're okay with that.
Okay. Director?
Through the chair, yes, I think we're okay with that.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Crutch.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Danko asked part of my question, so thanks for that in terms of what that would look like. The only one I would maybe suggest, it could also just include like not just where this fits into work, but responses for places where it doesn't. I look at 11.3, for instance, and think that's primarily going to be a capital infrastructure project for Ward 2, right? So I'd want to have some information from staff in that information report that outlines how we could achieve that if they recommend that we do it, right? So I want to make sure that that's also possible, and we see what the costing is and that kind of thing, because that's primarily the way I'm interpreting this. So if I got it wrong, happy to be corrected, but that's my thinking. So if that can be included in the information report, it's fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor. So where it's appropriate, it's an information report. If there's then other further recommendations, that would also then perhaps shift the nature of the report to include recommendations. Just looking for confirmation from staff.
Through the chair, in providing my answer on Councillor Danko's question, I was specifically referring to 11.1. I think the response to 11.2 and 11.3 may be different as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Satisfied? Good. And that exhausts our speakers list. So it's before committee for electronic vote. That's moving receipt and referral of 11.1, 2, and 3 to staff to report back to PW with either an information report or a recommendations report. Thank you. And again, sorry, Councillor Pauls, that you experienced a very scary situation on one of our infrastructures. On to, that carries 11.4, combustion-powered small equipment manufacturer standardization renewal, PW report 18028A, citywide. Can I please get a mover and seconder on this report? Thank you, Councillor Spadafora, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Thank you. And Director Cynthia Graham is available to provide a bit of an overview if committee members would like. Okay. Go ahead.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. So this is a report that asks and recommends that the standardization for steel and Honda-powered combustion small equipment be approved. They have been the standard since 2008. The city does have approximately 1,800 pieces, almost entirely of these two manufacturers in environmental services, transportation, and waste management. We're seeking to extend the brand standardization for another 5 years. There are numerous licensed dealers in Hamilton, so we equitably purchase these pieces of equipment from various suppliers across Hamilton. And just for note for committee, in anticipation of questions about internal combustion engines, we are piloting some electric tools this year with the hopes to expand our tool supply to include electric tools as well in the future.
Thank you for that. Committee members, any questions on this report or the recommendations? Seeing none, looks like everybody's good to go. Good to hear about that pilot. It's been moved and seconded. Please, time for your electronic vote. That carries unanimously. Thank you. On to 11.5, donations for forestry-related initiatives, PW Report 23052, citywide. Could I get a mover and seconder to put the motion or the report on the table? Thank you, Councillor Kasara and Danko. Committee members need an intro on this, or should we just open up speakers list requesting intro? Councillor Wilson?
I would, because it may answer a question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back over to you, Director Graham.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. This report seeks authority to enter into agreements and accept donations for small grants that would permit the city to access funds to assist with tree planting initiatives. We do get these opportunities from time to time, and in review of the policies, don't have the authority to enter into these agreements without council approval. There are 3 different grants that we're looking at, one with Tree Canada, one with Trees for Hamilton, and then one with the Canadian National Railway Company. And in addition to that, we are recommending for consideration delegated authority for the general manager to have the ability to enter into these agreements for smaller donations within parameters in order to be able to expedite the process of accepting these donations.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So just so I'm clear, thank you, Director Graham. My interest lay primarily in partnering with commercial organizations. So the definition of that would that include private sector? Through the chair.
Through the chair. So, yes. So a recent example is if a nursery supplier wanted to donate product to the city for our use, that would be something that would be captured through this.
Thank you. Not wishing to dip my toes in whatever the partnership will be like. Noting my reservations at the outset that we don't turn into a American university campus where every public space denotes the funding from a private entity. So we have Canadian Tire, Boulevard, and the like. So would you be able to, are you going to be bringing that back, or is this authority yours to go and run with it?
Certainly no plaques on trees.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah.
Through the chair. So there is a facility naming policy in process. This delegated authority would not contemplate that. This authority would give staff the ability to accept funds or in-kind materials. If there was a request from that particular donor to have naming rights or some acknowledgement, I think that would, the naming rights in particular, that would fall to that other process and that other subcommittee to council, and we would not have authority to be able to do that.
Councillor.
Thank you. I think it's an important principle for us to be guided by, and that public space belongs to everyone. And there are some organizations who would seek to denote ownership of public space or who they deem to be worthy of being defined as one way or another or public. So thank you for that. And I do note in the report, it's been a while since I read it, but the assistance of the Ward 2 Councillor's Office with respect to CNR and the donation of those trees along Strawn. So on behalf of Ward 1 residents who often frequent that space in that area, I'd just like to thank the councillor for their leadership in that regard, and look forward to that canopy once it gets set. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. There's nobody else on the speakers list. It's before, Councillor Kassar, please.
Just real briefly, Chair Nan, just wanted to comment that I'm very supportive of any process or simplifying of process for staff to make their lives easier. As I read the report, I saw it just removing work. Very glad Councillor Maureen Wilson brought up the element of corporate involvement. So happy to hear the question and the answer. So I'm very comfortable and very supportive.
Excellent. Okay. Next up, we have Councillor Cratch.
Thanks. Really appreciate the questions and the commentary so far, and just wanted to really highlight for I know a couple of my colleagues where this may be not necessarily their neck of the woods, they may not understand the landscape here, that this was with respect to primarily the larger funding here was with respect to changes coming to track at Metrolinx. So right next to the sort of little former dog run at the end of Strawn there, just where Strawn hits Ferguson, essentially, the CNR Metrolinx folks had cut down a number of trees. And when cutting those trees down and the brush down in order to expand the tracks and move the utilities so they could actually just make more service happen in Hamilton, they took out a big chunk of the sacred canopy that people are used to having there. It's a place where lots of people are. So they committed to right away saying, look, what can we do to mitigate this? So already a bunch of trees have been planted through the city's existing stock. But this is well down Strawn from the site at the top of the street where there's a CNR appeal. So I just wanted to distinguish those are not related to each other in any way, shape, or form. And I'm really grateful that they've come forward and said, here's some funding to help you plant. So we're going to be planting all the way down portions of the Strawn Street Linear Park and in Jackie Washington Park, which is right adjacent to this site, to just green that up. And staff have been really great about working with different kinds of native species, planting coniferous and deciduous trees. I'm looking forward to seeing some evergreens in the area and things like that that haven't been here, those kinds of trees. So I'm just really grateful for this and thankful that it's happening. I think it's a great example of how we can continue to talk to these transportation partners. A thing I heard a lot anecdotally before I was councillor was talking to CPCK, which is their new name, by the way, for CP Rail, and talking to CN Railway was this kind of forbidden or difficult or miresome thing to do. And my experience has been completely opposite. I reached out when I first got elected and have had some pretty fantastic discussions with Metrolinx, CN, and now we're talking to CPCK about all the Hunter Street underpasses and about cleaning those up and making them better infrastructure, right? So people feel safe there and people feel like they can use them. So this is just a long line, I hope, of interventions over the next few years between ourselves and the railway where we can see partnerships, because I think it really matters for us to work together to make our communities vibrant and enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you so much and great work. So that exhausts our speakers list and it's up for committee for vote. Excellent, that carries. On to motions. First up, we have 12.1, which is road rehabilitation on Summercrest Drive, Marcella Crescent, and Terra Court and St. Stephen Street in Hamilton Ward 5. Councillor Francis, please, your motion and seconder.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Thank you. Whereas Summercrest Drive, Marcella Crescent, Terra Court, and St. Stephen Street are all in Ward 5 are in need of road rehabilitation to extend the life of these roadways and therefore improve the service levels and reduce maintenance costs. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that Public Works staff be authorized and directed to rehabilitate the road and associated concrete works as required to be funded from the Ward 5 Capital Reinvestment Reserve number 108055 at an upset limit, including contingency not to exceed $1,500,000, with design anticipated to commence in 2023 and construction to be completed in 2024 on the following roads: Summercrest Drive from Green Hill Avenue to Marcella Crescent, Marcella Crescent from Summercrest Drive to Summercrest Drive, Terra Court from Summercrest Drive to south end of Terra Court, St. Stephen Street from Green Hill Avenue to Summercrest Drive, and B, that the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents
with such terms and conditions in form satisfactory to the city solicitor. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers list is open. Seeing none, it's before committee for approval. The drama. Carries. Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have 12.2, fence share cost recovery at 19 Quester Court in Ward 6. Councillor Jackson, please hear motion and seconder.
Thank you, Chair Nan. Moved by myself, seconded by Ward 5 Councillor Matt Francis. Fence share cost recovery, 19 Quester Court. Whereas the property located at this address is adjacent to city-owned Mount Lions Club Park, whereas a City of Hamilton Parks and Cemeteries section fence share policy exists, supporting the split cost of a chain link fence between a property owner and the City of Hamilton for properties that share a fence with a city-owned park. Whereas the property owner at 19 Quester has replaced a previously constructed wooden fence with another wooden fence along the joint property line. Whereas the fence share policy states that wooden fence maintenance is the sole responsibility of the property owner. And whereas the property owner is requesting to be reimbursed for 50% of the estimated cost of a chain link fence equivalent, therefore be it resolved, the property owner at 19 Quester Court be reimbursed for 50% of the estimated cost of a chain link fence equivalent to an upset limit of $4,000, including any contingencies. B, the city's share of this agreement be funded through Environmental Services Division, Parks and Cemeteries Section operating budget, and C, Mayor, City Clerk be authorized, directed to approve, execute all required agreements, ancillary documents with such terms, conditions in a form satisfactory to our city solicitor. Chair Nan, just a quick explanation. I want to thank Manager Kara Bunn for the discussion and the history and greater knowledge on the current cost share policy. And I want to thank her Senior Project Manager, Andrea McDonald, who helped as well. And of course, always LC Carrie McIntosh for the wordsmithing and the language of the motion. When my constituent approached me and I visited the site, I was surprised to learn that the cost-sharing policy only applies to a frost fence. So in other words, if he were to have built a frost fence, the city would have definitely provided 50% cost share. He abuts the park. The policy allows for it abutting a public park for greater privacy, safety, security from his family standpoint. He prefers to maintain a wooden fence. And also from the public's use of the park as well, for those families using it. Children, the last thing they may want from this family standpoint is a constant viewing of what's going on in the park, if that's not required or necessary. So I was really surprised at the fact that when I discovered upon the policy that if you had built a frost fence, no problem. And I want to make it clear, Chair Nan, and to my committee colleagues, this is not about the individual wanting, because of the greater cost of building the more privacy wooden fence, he's not asking for 50% of the wooden fence cost at all. I truly felt after discussion with him and with city staff, this is why I brought this motion forward. I thought it was more than fair that he would at least be eligible to the 50% that he would have received if he built a frost fence. Not asking for anything more, no additional costs, just because he built a more expensive fence. And that's why it's here before you today. I just thought from a fairness standpoint, and this is one of those where we have policy, but individual circumstances, I will always bring under consideration if I feel it's worthy, and staff have helped me to bring this forward with this motion. I'm hoping you'll get committee's consideration and support. And you see the upset limit there, hoping it's going to be, staff have told me, if approved, they're hoping it'll be less than the upset limit. Again, seconded by Councillor Francis. Thanks, Chair Nan.
Thank you, Councillor. We do have a speakers list. First up is Councillor Kassar.
Thanks, Chair Nan. There's a really interesting motion to read, and I understand entirely where Councillor Jackson is coming from. If I was in that position as that resident, I would be furrowing my brow as I'm doing right now. So my question would be to staff, if there's an explanation on why the policy is the way it is and not more similar to the way Councillor Jackson is handling the situation now, as the cost would be the same to the city. Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. The policy has been created in order to be able to budget and control costs from a city standpoint. Wooden fences cost more and they degrade faster. So operationally, previous decisions have been made that the policy includes the cost share for the chain link fence and nothing beyond that, with the ability of council to direct otherwise. So that's why it's before you today, because the policy reflects the budget and the operations that we have in place.
Thank you. I understand that, and I don't think anyone would suggest to increase the cost that the city would reimburse for fence construction. If someone puts in a wood fence, as has been done here, to be compensated for the lower wire fence or frost fence. Haven't heard that term before. But one thing I did hear Director Graham say is the expected lifespan of a wooden fence versus a frost fence. So maybe could you elaborate on that and the consideration that was given when this policy was developed, if in fact that was a consideration? Through your chair.
Through the chair, that's my understanding. I think this policy has been in place for a long time, but it is the lived experience of our staff that wooden fences do degrade faster, and so there hasn't been an effort to change that from the city standpoint.
Okay, thank you. So there's a little bit of history there, I guess, but I think something to consider maybe in the near future if more of these come forward. It just takes more time and effort to repay or reimburse something that was going to be reimbursed by the policy anyway. So not suggesting anything today, just wanted to gain an understanding, and I'll support the motion.
Thank you. That exhausts our speakers list, so it's been duly moved and seconded for committee's electronic vote, please. That carries. On to 12.4, which is installation of speed cushions at traffic calming as a traffic calming measure on Arnault Street in Ward 6. Councillor Jackson, please.
Chair Nan, I'm back from last year with a speed cushion request. Moved by myself, seconded by the Ward 14 councillor, Mike Spadafora, installation of speed cushion as a traffic calming measure in Arnault. Whereas residents on Arnault and Ward 6 have advocated for the installation of speed cushions to address roadway safety concerns as a result of speeding. Whereas signatures were collected from residents, resulting in support by 10 of 16 homes, 63%, on Arnault for the installation of the speed cushions as a traffic calming measure. Therefore, be resolved that TOM staff be authorized and directed to install one speed cushion as a traffic calming measure on Arnault between Anacapri Drive and Templemead as part of the 23 traffic calming program's fall application. B, that the speed cushion install be funded from my Ward 6 minor maintenance account number listed to be completed under the contract number listed at an upset limit including contingency not to exceed $7,000. C, the mayor and city clerk be authorized directed to execute any required agreements, ancillary documents with such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. Chair Nan, I just want to as well quickly thank again Elsie McIntosh and Acting Superintendent Jamal Durrani from our traffic department for helping me with the speed cushion request and petition. I spoke to a couple of the petition organizers that looked after this on their street, Rosanna Althouse and Steve and Ruth Phillips. And I asked about the other 6 homes, and they said either they weren't home or they didn't have any objection, just didn't want to further sign the petition, but there was no actual objection on the street. And for any of my colleagues that may not be familiar, Arnault is a little north-south street between Anacapri and Templemead, and right at Templemead, a 3-way stop, is where hundreds of children cross going into the pathway that leads to Templemead Elementary School. So I'm very supportive of this request. Again, we can't put police officers 24/7 as much as our constituents would like them to be in our streets and neighborhoods. And I have found, and traffic have confirmed, speed cushions are an effective way of slowing traffic down and making the streets safer. Seconded by Councillor Spatafora. Thank you, Chair Nan.
Thank you. No one's on the speakers list, so it's been moved and seconded and before committee for vote. And that carries. Thank you. On to 12.5. Trenholm Bocce Courts at Trenholm Park at 135 Trenholm Crescent in Hamilton in Ward 6. Councillor Jackson, please, your motion and seconder.
Please don't accuse me of monopolizing the motions. Thank you, Chair Nan. Moved by myself, seconded by Ward 8 Councillor John Paul Danko. Trenholm Bocce Courts at Trenholm Park. Whereas the majority of City of Hamilton-owned facilities and park assets, buildings in Ward 6 are maintained by the city's Facilities Operation Maintenance section of the Energy Fleet and Facilities Management Division of Public Works. Whereas the Recreation Master Plan of last year recommends no new bocce courts or dedicated bocce buildings and instead emphasizes continued communication between the city and bocce user groups to ensure safe and reasonable use of bocce support buildings. Excuse me. Whereas the Trenholm Bocce Association members, all volunteers, are requesting a feasibility study of the current bocce clubhouse at Trenholm Park to investigate options including both an extended canopy as well as a new canopy over the existing bocce courts to provide a more sheltered environment against the sun, rain, to extend the bocce playing system for season for members. Whereas professional services are required to prepare as-built to determine feasibility and investigate options to determine next steps, i.e. capital design options, construction cost estimates, etc., for an extended and or additional canopies at the current clubhouse at Trenholm Park, including a new canopy over the courts. Therefore be resolved A, staff be authorized and directed to retain professional services to prepare as built to determine feasibility, investigate options for extended and or additional canopies at the current bocce courts at Trenholm Park, including a new canopy over the courts to be funded from my Capital Ward 6 Reinvestment Reserve, number noted, at an upset limit including contingency not to exceed $50,000, and B, the mayor and city clerk, as usual, be authorized and directed to execute any agreements, ancillary documents, such terms, conditions, forms satisfactory to the city solicitor quickly. Chair Nan, somewhat piggybacking on a motion Councillor Danko brought several months ago for a similar type facility in his ward. I want to thank Acting Manager Janet Warner and again Elsie McIntosh for helping me with the language and wording of the motion. And I've got a great group of bocce members and volunteers, the executive Manny Vecchione, Paula Valeria, Osvaldo Tavani, and Marcella Brown, 80 members of this bocce facility. It was built in the mid-90s. This Trenholm Park that includes the bocce court, Chair Nan, has won environmental awards for an urban park tucked in amongst the natural environment of the Red Hill Valley and Albion Falls area. So the courts themselves are about 25 years old, a clubhouse that's in deteriorating condition, canopy that was only, if you will, extended a short distance. And so this motion with my Ward 6 money is just wanting to have staff give them the opportunity, look at the feasibility of what we can do to make it safer, bigger, and more modern. Seconded by Councillor Danko. Thank you, Chair Nan.
Thank you. And there's nobody on the speakers list, so it's moved and seconded before committee for electronic vote. And that carries. I wonder how many new bocce courts we're getting this year in total. I wonder. On to notices of motion. Are the notices of motion? Oh. Whoops, I missed one. 12.6. Installation of speed cushions as traffic calming measure on Folkestone Avenue, Ward 7. My apologies, Councillor Pauls. I moved the page too quickly. Please, your motion and seconder.
Thank you. first of all, I want to say we're talking about speed bumps, safety, and I want to say that yesterday morning I had a meeting with Carolyn Ryle, the new director, and it was wonderful. And it was great because she had other options besides speed bumps for traffic safety. I learned so much from you, so I just want to publicly say thank you. And before I put this motion, actually we talked about this motion on Folkestone. Just before the election, people were upset that I had put speed bump on one road and now all the traffic is going to this road. And they said, if you don't put the speed bumps, and it was just, and I said, if I get elected again, I would put speed bumps. And I had a conversation with Carolyn that, first of all, from now on, I'm going to get the study done before we say do a petition, because I just got 3 more petitions from 3 more streets. And we say, okay, you do the petition, we'll get all the people, and we'll get it done. And staff says, well, really, we don't recommend it. And now I'm stuck. So I'm just saying, I don't know this one. I went yesterday. I had to leave planning early because I had a meeting with one of them that has, done the petition, and now he doesn't want it because it's right in front of his house. So these are the problems we're facing. And so I told him I'll put the petition. He wants speed bumps, he wants safety, but maybe they want a stop sign. And I learned that really stop signs are not for reducing speed. So I just want to say thank you. It was wonderful talking to you, and congratulations, and I'm looking forward to working with you and calling you more often now, because you brought definitely some new ideas, so thank you for that. But I'm going to read my motion now. And if that's okay.
Please, Councillor.
So it's moved by myself. I need a seconder, and I'm sure Councillor Nan, you'll second it? Thank you. Okay, this is an installation speed cushioning on traffic calming measure on Folkestone Avenue. Whereas residents on Folkestone and Ward 7 have advocated for installation of speed cushioning and addressed roadway safety concern as a result of speeding, and whereas signatures were collected from residents, resulting in support of 37 out of 52, which is 71%, homes of Folkestone Avenue for installation of speed cushioning and traffic calming measure. Therefore, let it be resolved that the transportation and operation maintenance staff be authorized and direct to install up to 3 speed cushionings on traffic calming measure on Folkestone Avenue between Burko Avenue, Longhurst Drive, and part of the 2023 traffic calming program fall application. That the speed cushion installation on Folkestone Avenue be funded from the Ward 7 maintenance account 403-1911-607 to be completed under contract C-15-1823 at the upset limit, including contingency not to exceed $21,000. That the mayor and the city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any requirement agreements and accessory documents with such term and conditions in the form of satisfactory to the city solicitor. So I promised, I had this email saying that really we need to relook at it. So before we put these in, yes, we're going to put speed bumps, but I want to have another look of where we can put them. So if we could do that, I would really appreciate it. And thank you again, Carolyn, and I'll hope to hear from you if somebody went there, talked to the resident to see where else we could put these speed bumps. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Technical reviews are really important and help make sure we get the right infrastructure into the right place. So excellent work there. It's been moved and seconded. Nobody's on the speakers list. On to committee's vote, please. Excellent, carries. On to 13, notice of the motion. Councillor Danko, I understand you have a notice, and do you intend to seek to waive the rules? Okay, over to you.
Thank you. This is a motion to waive the rules to allow for the introduction of a motion respecting installation of speed cushions as the traffic calming measures on Descenso Drive. Reason to waive the rules. This is entirely my fault. The staff sent the email. I did not respond in time and hence missed the deadline to get it on the agenda as a motion, but it is timely as it's going in the fall installation program.
Get those fall installations in, folks. Today's the last day. So you're seeking to waive the rules. Just joking, just joking. Your motions are due today, just joking. So it's seeking to waive the rules. That's been moved, hasn't been seconded yet. Seconding by Councillor Wilson.
I just want it noted that I've seconded to waive the rules for Councillor Danko. Thank you.
Got it. Next Public Works Committee meeting is in September 8th. September 8th. Yeah, now that everybody's alerted, I'm sorry to the Transportation Ops team for flagging that. So it's been moved and seconded to waive the rules. That's the first thing we're doing, committee. Okay, they're letting you do it. Go for it, Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Chair. So this is moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. For the installation of speed cushions as traffic calming measures on Descenso Drive, whereas residents have advocated for the installation of speed cushions on Descenso Drive in Ward 8 to address road safety concerns as a result of speeding and cut-through traffic. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that Transportation Operations Maintenance staff be authorized and directed to install 2 speed cushions as traffic calming measures on Descenso Drive between Clio Court and Genoa Drive as part of the 2023 Traffic Calming Program's fall application. That the speed cushion installation on Descenso Drive be funded from the Ward 8 Capital Reinvestment Reserve number there to be completed under contract C15-18-23 at an upset limit, including contingency not to exceed $14,000, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements, ancillary documents with such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. And if I could just take a moment to speak to this motion because it is a little bit interesting. So first of all, this particular neighborhood wasn't included in the Ward 8 Complete Streets Review. It's mostly park and green space, and so it was excluded from that. However, this particular street on the corner of Stone Church and Upper James is a common cut-through for traffic that's seeking to avoid that intersection. In particular, there's a number of car dealerships on Upper James that use this particular neighborhood for either testing vehicles that are in for repair or for test drives. So it kind of created an interesting situation where the cut-through traffic and the speeding wasn't necessarily routine speeding as we think of it. It was people trying out their new cars and cutting through the neighborhood along with vehicles that are much too big for the space and other cut-through traffic there. So you'll notice that there is no petition here, and that is because these speed cushions are recommended by staff. It took a considerable amount of time to get to a point to really understand what the problem in the neighborhood was, because when they did do the initial speed studies, it didn't meet the threshold for speed cushions, and it took some additional investigation to really understand what was going on in the neighborhood and the source of the problem and a recommended solution. So I really do appreciate the work of our public works staff for doing that investigative work and ultimately recommending the solution that you have before us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. A lot of new cars in the area? That's strange. Okay, so it's been duly moved and seconded. Nobody's on the speakers list before committee for approval. Cost of a car these days, I don't know. And that carries. Thank you. On to general information, other business. First up is 14.1, amendments to the outstanding business list. May I please get a mover and seconder to approve these amendments? Moved by Councillor Paul, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Thank you. Any discussion on the OBL items? Thank you. First up is Councillor Wilson.
I'm assuming that's me.
It's you.
Just a quick question. Brought this up earlier about the Beverly Path, understanding staff are doing some project management work on this and that the local community organization, in this case, the Rockton Lions Club, is pursuing the funding of this project. Seeing the delay, just wondering what, I guess, a reason why, expecting what the anticipated reasons could be, as well as to what extent has the funding organization kind of been communicated about this potential delay.
Director Graham, thank you.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. Staff have been working with the community group, and we do need a bit of additional time to work through design and come up with the costing. We do have some staffing shortages in some critical positions in the parks section, so we're doing our best, but do need a little bit of additional time on this one. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. Through the chair, definitely appreciate things can't go faster than they can go. We can only move as fast as the resources we're resourced to do. So I appreciate that. Wondering what the impacts are in terms of say, coming back later than actual installation. We have construction times, we have bad times. Just wondering if that's been sensed in the kind of pushing back of the date, and if the date makes sense for an accelerated construction phase or lining things up for construction, or if we'll be getting a report back date and then by the time things like procurement can actually happen, it's winter, or just to what extent that's been thought of, or if this is kind of we just need it a little bit further behind in the schedule. There's other pressing needs right now, and getting a better understanding of how to manage this moving forward.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I'll get a more detailed report from staff and let you know through the chair to the councillor. We have indicated summer 2024, which is a bit of a loose timeline. So my hope is that we could get the work completed in time to have the construction happen per the expectations of the community. But I will confirm that with your office, and we can work from there.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Again, happy to support the OBL today, like understanding staff, again, are working with the resources that we provide, and that this is a strain across the organization. Happy to connect offline about how our office can be supportive. I definitely know this is a priority project for the community, and it's also one of the ones where, because it's a joint funding initiative, these are the types of things where I think community partners are looking to move a little bit faster, given that they're bringing some dollars to the table, but also understanding everything is coming through the same Public Works department. And Ward 13's been keeping Public Works busy with lots of flooding recently. So I like really understanding there's competing pressures here. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Over to passing the chair over to Vice Chair Pauls.
Good.
Thank you. Through you, similarly, just wondering systematically then, if there are OBL items that are specific projects for wards that are connected to community initiation for those, and OBL items are then moving an entire season, or in the case of 14.1AE, we're going out 2 seasons, and the need in that community for this project specifically is around fall maintenance and support there. So now we're looking at a spring update. So just wanted to get a sense from staff. One, to be able to facilitate those kinds of updates happening to the corresponding ward councillors' offices, and so that we're able to help staff communicate with the project team in the community. Thank you. Through you.
Yeah, through the chair, I appreciate that feedback, and will endeavor to ensure that communication is forthcoming.
Thank you. I know you guys have a lot on your plate, so appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Take the chair back.
Do we have a mover and seconder? So now over to voting, please.
Apologies, I did jump on as a second-time speaker. Sorry about that.
No worries. Go for it.
Just a question about the first one, winterizing public washrooms. Understanding we're getting a winter response report back, I believe in September, although Monday feels like a year away, so I could be misremembering. And then just wondering, is October 18th, winter starts in November, is October 18th enough time to action any recommendations that are forthcoming in the plan? And I guess, what does that mean for us as a Public Works Committee in hearing an October 18th winterizing public washrooms report? Does that mean it's unlikely, like 2023 winter is likely out of it, or just what are some of those considerations that we're thinking about in kind of passing or receiving this OBL?
Thank you. Director?
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. On this item, the recommendations I anticipate will be to refer the increase in standard to continue the pilot to the operating budget process. So the timing of October wouldn't affect that recommendation. We did do some public consultation and wanted to have just a little bit of extra time to incorporate that information into the report for fulsome consideration for council.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I know just OBLs sometimes pass by, so thank you for the answers on this one.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, time to vote. That carries. Thank you. Any other business? Okay, so does anybody want to go in camera to discuss the closed portion session minutes from the last meeting? So that's a no. Can I get a mover and seconder to approve the minutes from the closed session? Moved by Councillor Cassar, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. That will require a vote. That carries. Thank you. Now, adjournment. May I please have a mover in Councillor Taddison, first up with the hand, second by Councillor Spatafora. To adjourn, please, we need an electronic vote. While you're voting, thank you to staff in preparation of all the reports and to clerk staff for all your support in today's meeting. That carries. Have a great afternoon, everyone.